Hi, team. I'm Fitz Koehler, your fitness expert and very noisy race announcer from Fitzness.com. And welcome to the Fitzness Show. Today, I have a doozy of a story for you. This is one where you're going to have to maybe pull the car over to listen because it's absolutely gripping and magical and terrifying and all sorts of those big feelings. But one of the great gifts of race announcing for me, or probably the greatest gift of race announcing for me, is getting to connect with you, right? All of these interesting people. And as a fitness pro, I tell you what, it's my dream come true when I stand at a start line and some race organization has given me thousands and thousands of people who said, you know what, exercise is a good idea. I'm going to go do it. And my whole job at that point is just to engage, inform, entertain, make sure you have a wonderful, rewarding time and you feel special. But when you show up, I wonder, who are you? How did that person get here? And then when you come to the finish line, first of all, I fall in love. But then I think, well, what did it take to get them here? Oh, and this story that these three men lined up at the start line of the Monterey Bay Half Marathon in 2022. And I didn't know who they were. But by the end of that half marathon, everyone was abuzz with these guys and the story is just incredible. So this year I actually got to meet them and I once again fell in love and got really excited. I said, hey, come please get on my show and share your story because there's so much to offer. So I want to start by telling you two of them died. And here they come. We're going to start by introducing Mr. Gregory Gonzales from Vancouver, Washington. Hi, Greg.
Hello, Fitz. How are you? Nice to be here.
I am so happy to have you here. And I'm so happy you're here. I'm so happy I'm here. We have a lot to be happy for, right?
Absolutely. Nothing but happiness on my side for sure.
Absolutely. And with an equally great attitude from Marin, California, Mr. Michael Heilemann. Hi, Mike.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited that you're here.
Yeah, it's great to see you again.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm so happy you all said yes. And then are we going to call this next guy the star of our show?
Hero.
Our hero.
Yeah, our hero. Here he comes, Dr. Stephen Lome. Hi, Steve.
Hello, how are you?
I am fantastic. So you're not only a hero, but you're a cardiologist.
Yes, and thanks for having me on the show.
Of course, of course. So before we get into the miracle at Monterey, I want to go just a little get to know you. Who are you? Let's say November 5th. What's the date we're talking about? November what, 22?
I think it was the 13th, right?
Okay. All right. November 13th. Mike, you start. Who are you on that day? Where do you live? What's your family like? What do you do for exercise?
Yeah, we do a lot of things. We mountain biked. We trained up for the race. We did a couple 10-mile runs beforehand to get ready, and we've been training for a while. So it was, we thought we were pretty well prepared, and the race went well until the end for me.
Okay, so who are you though? Tell us, where are you from? What do you do? Who are your people?
I'm originally from LA, the LA area, Pacific Palisades, and we moved up here about 19 years ago to Marin County. And I do video games for a living. I'm a CTO and advisor to video game companies.
How interesting. Any games we'd be familiar with?
The Sims 4, Medal of Honor, NHL.
Okay.
A few of them.
Very impressive. Very impressive. And you, Greg, tell us about you.
I live in Vancouver, Washington. I'm a lawyer by trade. I became a judge full-time in 2012 here in Clark County Superior Court. I've run the Monterey Bay Half Marathon at least 2 to 3 times before. One was canceled, I believe, but I had done 2 before. I was excited to get down there, and I have 3 boys and a grandfather of 2 with another one on the way.
Wow.
Nice.
Congrats with the new grandchild on the way. That's something to look forward to, right?
Absolutely. The best ever.
Absolutely. And then the guy who has a ton of kids. Tell us about you, Stephen.
Well, I'm originally from the Chicago area, the Chicago suburbs, where I was born and raised and did all my medical training, internal medicine residency, cardiology fellowship at Loyola University. Married to a beautiful wife, Helen, who's family medicine physician. And we do have 6 awesome kids. Youngest is 5, oldest is 17. And I got into running back in 2014 when I was about 100 pounds heavier and suffering from a lot of obesity-related medical issues. And I changed my diet strictly and started exercising to overcome those things. And running has now become my favorite exercise by far.
Well, that is fascinating. And that is definitely something I didn't know. So I do a lot of keynote speaking, and I particularly have spoken to a bunch of medical providers or to professors who teach medical students. And I always find it fascinating when someone in the heart health field is morbidly obese and 100 pounds heavier you were. How did you rectify the two situations? And what was your aha moment when you made the change?
Yeah, so, it's complex. Of course, I was born on a standard American diet, and my sister was 450 pounds in high school. My parents were over 300 pounds. So that was kind of where I was raised. And throughout our medical training, really, we're not trained in nutrition and lifestyle. We're trained in pills and surgery. Actually, the 2 professors that trained me were both 300 pounds, and they were both type 2 diabetics themselves. And so the mindset of diet and lifestyle was really, kind of food off to the side. Oh, now don't worry about that. Here's all the medications you need. And, if you have a clogged artery, we could open it up with a stent or a bypass. So for me, the aha moment was, I remember walking up a flight of stairs carrying a light box, like 10 or 15 pounds. And I couldn't make it up the stairs. I was short of breath. My heart was pounding. My daughter was only 5 years old at the time, sitting at the top, looking at me like, Dad, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm okay. And I was like, geez, I have to be around and healthy for my kids. And so I made a lot of mistakes. I love marathons and I love running now, but the first thing you do when you're 270 pounds is don't just sign up for a marathon right away.
Right.
But that's what I did. I signed up for a marathon, trying to focus on exercise and not focusing on diet. Then I tried to cut back the junk food and the donuts and the cookies and the fast food when really we should eliminate it. And eventually watched a documentary called Forks Over Knives, which changed my life to be a more plant-based diet and go that way. And so with exercise and changing my diet, I feel great. Lost all the weight, ideal body weight. And now that's my passion in the medical world is lifestyle medicine.
Well, I love that story. And just fascinating, 100 pounds down.
Yeah.
And you,
crazy.
And you changed your family tree. It's interesting how many people come to me and they say, well, I'm overweight because my genes are overweight. We're overweight people. I say, no, all your people have terrible habits. Your people eat like obese people. And you decided to, change your family tree. That's spectacular.
Yeah, absolutely. They always say genes load the gun, diet and lifestyle pulls the trigger. Yes, genes run in families, but so do diets and lifestyles. So.
Yeah, this is great. I'm giddy with this information. Excellent start. All right, so Greg, you'd run Monterey quite a few times before.
2 times before, for sure.
2 times. And Mike, what about you? What made you choose Monterey Half Marathon in 22?
Yeah, I'd run it before, 9 years before, the 2013, I think it was, that I did.
And what brought you back? What made you think, I'm going to go do it that day?
The course is beautiful, and it was supposed to be our sort of like last run, last long race. But the end of the race changed that.
Okay. And then Dr. Lome, what made you register for the Monterey Bay Half Marathon?
Well, we moved from Chicago about 3 years ago across the country over to Monterey. So we live in the Monterey area. And, because of the pandemic, everything was closed down. And my 2 older kids are cross-country runners now for the local high school, and they'd never run a half marathon. So once they finally were going to have an in-person half marathon here locally, I was like, that's perfect. Let's do it. So I signed up myself and my 2 older kids that was our first time doing the Monterey Half.
Okay. All right. First timers. And then how did you guys feel that morning? Everything working fine in the morning?
Yeah, everything was great. We were really looking forward to getting out on the course, and it's such a beautiful course that goes through, historic downtown and right by the beach for most of it. It's just beautiful. And that's, we were ready and looking forward to it.
And Greg, you were feeling good that
I
morning?
felt great. So I was staying up in Santa Clara. I was going to the San Francisco Charger game that evening, I was hoping. So I stayed in Santa Clara. I went to bed about 7 o'clock on Saturday night. I woke up at 3 to get ready to leave. Felt terrific. No issues whatsoever, other than just being really cold. I just remember I couldn't get over the chill factor for the first hour or so.
Huh. Well, it actually is pretty cold. We have cool mornings in November. So, and then Dr. Lome, what was your plan with your kids? Were you going to all stay together throughout the race?
Kind of. I mean, I was going to try to keep up with them. They were definitely faster than me. But I'd run many half marathons, probably 100 plus half marathons. And this was going to be their first. So I'm like, well, maybe I'll have a shot at actually keeping up with them. So, but they were a little bit ahead of me for the first 3 miles. And then they finished way ahead of me for obvious reasons.
Okay, well, good. I'm glad that happened. So to get into the big story, how do you guys like to tell it? Greg, do you want to kick it off with your first 3 miles, or is that your turn, Steve?
No, go for it, Greg.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a convoluted story, and I'll start from the beginning. So when I arrived at my parking spot that I found not too far from the starting line, I had all these little nuances and Godwinks, as somebody later told me what they were, that put me in the right spot at the right time so that Dr. Lome could save me. To get there, I had a number of little things that I went through. So I was walking down to the race line. I didn't like the pair of socks I had on. So I turned around, went back to the car. So that took a little bit of time. And it was pretty cold, as I indicated. I wasn't loose, so I jogged a little bit, stretched a little bit. I was signed up to be in Corral D, but I said, I'm going to start slower. I'll start in Corral F. So I got to F and I couldn't get loose. I just felt so uncomfortable. I said, okay, take a time out, potty break, came back in. Then I went to Corral E and I still couldn't get loose. And I was just so knotted up. So then I said, okay, you're going to have to go to Corral D. You're going to be fine in your group. So I went to the back of Corral D and still I could not relax whatsoever. It just felt uncomfortable for me. And then finally, I told myself, playing mental ping pong, let's go where I normally go on races, whether it's a marathon or half marathon. I like to be on the outside so that I'm away from folks. So I went to the front of my Corral D, and instantly I felt so much relief come over me. I felt so comfortable at that point. No problems. I felt terrific. So then I'll leave it there. Go ahead, Michael.
No, you need to
You
keep going. So at that point, I got into the race. The race started. I heard your voice. I remember hearing you distinctly. And I kept thinking, is that a radio personality, TV personality? So I got going and I started a little slow. It was cold. And then I decided to pick up the pace a little bit to try to stay ahead of my group or corral, and went around the lake, around the park, came up, went down, got through mile 2, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, not too bad, 11 miles to go. Then I came upon that little hill, and I thought it was a steeper hill until I saw it again this year. It was a tiny hill. Went up the tiny hill thinking 2.5, maybe I'm coming to 3. Got to the top, turned right, and I said, piece of cake. I have 10 more to go. I can do it, not a problem. It's downhill. I can go to the beach, and then it's flat back and forth. I've done it before, and I know the terrain. As I turned right, I told myself, you have this. I'm going to Brophy's afterwards in Carmel, and then I'll drive up to Santa Clara. That's the last thing I remember. Nothing else, nothing more. Didn't feel anything. I felt terrific.
I could fill in what happened.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I was at mile 3, and I was maybe, 50 to 100 feet behind Greg. And I saw him collapse and fall down, like no warning. Sometimes when people, like a little bit with Mike, some people get a little dizzy, stumble, stop, what's going on? But that's not what happened to Greg. He just collapsed out, like he's running, and down he went, hit his head on the ground. And I approached him and could clearly tell real quick, he didn't have a pulse at all, and he wasn't breathing. And some other people, stopped as well. There was a neurosurgeon that stopped, stabilized his neck since he hit his head. And we started CPR. We started doing chest compressions. Other people called 911. We were in a little bit of an awkward spot of the course, meaning we weren't right by like a medical tent or facility. And we did CPR for about 5 minutes until the defibrillator arrived. And when we hooked it up, the heart rhythm is something called ventricular fibrillation, which is actually a universally fatal arrhythmia unless a shock is delivered. And the sooner you do it, the better, because after ventricular fibrillation, then the person would be flatline and it's almost impossible to get the person back at that point. So thank goodness we got the defibrillator there quick enough, delivered one shock, and the rhythm went back to normal. And it took a little while, but Greg woke up and he was coming to. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was crazy. Because as a cardiologist, I have taken care of cardiac arrest patients hundreds of times and defibrillated patients 100 plus times. I don't count many times, but that's always been in the hospital. You have a nurse, you have an IV, you have staff, and we're in the ER or something. Very controlled setting. Doing it outside the hospital, that was my first experience actually doing CPR and defibrillating somebody out of the hospital. So I was a little frazzled, but very happy that it seemed like we got Greg back. He was in the ambulance. He was talking, and I wasn't last place in the race. So I called the ER doc to give him a heads up as to what happened, and called the interventional cardiologist on call, and decided to keep going to see if I can catch my kids. At this point, my kids were in front of Greg. They didn't know what was going on. So
right. Okay, so I have questions here. So you said he collapsed and he hit his head. Did he was running forward, but he fell backwards?
Yeah, kind of. I think it was the side of his head. I don't remember. Greg, you might remember where it was.
Left side of I had blood on my left side and a couple cuts on the left side.
Yeah.
Wow. And Dr. Lome, did it make you nervous being out there alone without your normal stuff?
A little bit, honestly, if anybody is going to know how to do this, it's probably a cardiologist. So, I mean, I'd been in a scenario where I had to do chest compressions and CPR and multiple times. But yeah, I mean, in my mind, I was like, where's the defibrillator? Where's the defibrillator? I want the defibrillator now, because I'm used to it like being right there. It's even to the point where, like, when a patient comes in with a heart attack, the reason people die from heart attacks is they have ventricular fibrillation and their heart stops. So if somebody's having a heart attack, we hook up a defibrillator to them proactively, just in case their heart stops. And so I could tell you at least a couple dozen times I've been talking to a heart attack patient saying, hey, listen, you're having a heart attack. We're going to need to do the stent procedure. When, boom, they go into ventricular fibrillation. They essentially die right in front of you. And you're like, oh, no big deal. We have them hooked up. All right, everybody clear, shock, wake up. And then I say, we have to do this procedure. We're going to go and open up your artery. And they look at me and say, whoa, something weird just happened here. And I'm like, oh, yeah. You just died. You went into ventricular fibrillation. We shocked you, though. We got you back. No big deal. We have to take care of the heart attack now. And so, like, that's how simple it is in the hospital, because we're ready for it. And if you act really quick, it's as if nothing happened. Almost what happened with Mike, actually, because we got to him so fast. So time is critical, is of the essence. So what made me nervous about it wasn't necessarily not having, nurses there with IV access and all the medications that we could potentially use if we needed to. It was, I need that defibrillator now. That was the key.
Wow. And he was technically dead. Is that correct?
You could think of it that way. I'm sure, it takes time before the brain activity goes away and everything, but there was no blood circulating throughout his system. And the reason you could kind of think of it as being, fatal is because without the shock, without the intervention, he wouldn't have made it. And that's one of the crazy things is Greg's a very fit athlete. He's run many marathons. And this was mile 3 this happened at. What would it have been if he was running a training race all by himself or with his dog? If nobody was there, and there was no way to get somebody there quickly, it would have been definitely a different situation.
Well, also, what if he was in Corral F?
Yeah, we joke because, I stopped to go to the bathroom at around mile 2 or 3, drank too much coffee. Had I not stopped, I wouldn't have been there. There was a lot of little nuances that kind of made the timing, just absolutely perfect for me to be there right behind Greg.
Oh, thank goodness. So, and then what did Greg say when he woke up? Do you remember?
No, at first he was a little bit incoherent, but he didn't really start talking a lot till he was in the ambulance, and I didn't really go into the ambulance with him. And my understanding is, Greg, you don't even remember anything until you were in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, right? Yeah.
Right.
So nothing, just we're like, are you okay? How are you feeling? And it was just, confused.
Sure. So, Dr. Lome, you save Greg, send him off to the hospital, and then you decide to keep running. Go from there. Or actually, so you decide to keep running. Mike, this is your turn to tell us about your race.
Yeah, sure thing. I started out, it was all great. And then we came up to mile 3. I usually run with my wife, and so we were running together, and she's faster than I am, so she usually takes off at some point. But at that point, we were together, and heard ambulance coming, and so we all were pulling to the side, and we unfortunately were able to come on the scene where I saw them doing CPR on Greg as we were coming up there, and the ambulance was just arriving. It was surreal, and I commented with my wife that, we had my father go down in a 10K race right before the end of a heart attack in a similar circumstance. And so we were, thinking about that and wishing Greg well. We didn't know it was Greg then, of course. But we were hoping that it would be a good outcome to that. And then, we continued running our race, and I felt pretty good up until the last couple of miles, and I just slowed down a little bit. And then right at the end, I picked up my pace and passed everybody that I could before hitting the finish line.
Wait, was your wife still with you?
She'd already gone past.
Okay.
Yeah, she'd crossed like 4 minutes before me, and she managed to come back around and saw me as I was finishing, but then had to go around the corral, so she didn't see me at the end of the race. But yeah, I crossed the finish line and slowed down right before crossing. And
were you feeling good at the finish line?
Yeah, I was feeling tired, but I didn't feel anything wrong. And took like 10 or 15 steps, and then I started to feel a little dizzy. So I held onto the railing for a second, and then I was like, well, come on, just man up, and it's, you're fine. You finished the race. And then the next thing I knew, I was on the ground and waking up.
So Dr. Lome.
Yeah. So I also picked up the pace approaching the finish line because I had a little bit left in my tank. And so I was like, all right, let me run a little faster. I crossed the finish line, and I heard somebody yell, we need some help over here. And I had seen, I had again about 50 or 100 feet, kind of peripherally, Mike collapse. I didn't see him quite as vividly as Greg, but he had collapsed and Mike had hit his head. There was a little bit of blood on the pavement. And I was just like, you got to be kidding me. This can't be happening again. He must have just fainted. I'm just thinking there's no way. This can't be a full cardiac arrest. But, clearly he had no pulse. He wasn't breathing. And, I was always trained that, even if somebody just has a typical fainting spell, how do you know? When you're watching them collapse, you don't know if they're having a fainting spell and they're going to wake up, or if they're having a full cardiac arrest. And so you start CPR because if it is a full cardiac arrest, time is of the essence. And so if, I'm going to start chest compressions, and he's just going to wake up and say, get off me. What are you doing? Because he just fainted, right? No, he wasn't waking up. And I was like, oh no, I've been doing this for almost a minute here. And thank goodness, a race volunteer within about a minute brought a defibrillator because the medical tent was right there at the finish line. And I was like, oh, this is wonderful. We hooked up the defibrillator, and it was a little bit of a challenge because the way these defibrillators, the one that we had for Greg was a full, very nice, high-tech paramedic defibrillator. The one for Mike was the ones that you see hanging on the wall that are meant for anybody to use. And you basically just hook it up and you follow the prompts, which are audio verbal prompts. And it was very loud at the finish line, which made it a little bit challenging to hear what it was saying. But after we hooked up the defibrillator, held the defibrillator up, to my ear with the volunteer that was there, and it clearly said shock advised, stand back, and then it charged up, the light lit up and pushed the button, and the shock was delivered. What we're always trained to do is don't wait to see what happens after the shock. Start compressions right away once again, because it's so critical to keep blood flowing. I started doing chest compressions again, and literally within 5 or 10 seconds, Mike opens his eyes and is like confused. What's going on? I was like, yes, that's what's supposed to happen. Thank goodness. And he woke up, funny, but he went to his watch and he stopped the Strava on his watch right away to record his race time. That's a true competitor.
Wow.
That was like the first thing he did. But he's like, hey, I want to get up. And he was kind of confused. Like, why am I down here? I must have fallen or fainted or something. And we had to tell Mike, no, you don't get up. You just had a cardiac arrest. Wow, it was crazy that it happened. I was tired myself, obviously, after running a half marathon. But then the medical director, Dr. John Ellison, he was there too because he was at the finish line at the medical tent. And I remember the look on his face when we delivered the shock. His jaw just dropped because he was like, I can't believe this. He told me immediately afterwards, this happened at mile 3 as well. He's like, I thought to myself, wow, this is a once every 40 years event that it happened once. It can't be happening again, but it was, and thank goodness. Look at Greg and Mike now. How amazing!
Yeah, and the crazier coincidence too, even for me, is that it was Dr. Lome that did the CPR on both of us, and he wouldn't have been behind me if it wasn't for Greg.
Yeah, you needed Greg to have his cardiac arrest for you to be saved. That's just wild. I mean, because what are the odds? Someone capable. I think we can talk about CPR and how we're all capable of doing those things, but the confidence, right, and the instant action, which thank God Dr. Lome was ready to take action right away. And I imagine you were beat up from your half marathon, but to summon the strength, because CPR is not easy, correct? Or chest compressions, I should say. Yeah,
I mean, doing it for a minute or two isn't too bad, but when you're doing it, sometimes, unfortunately, these episodes can last 10, 20, 30 minutes. And then it gets really tiring and you have to, take turns with other people who know what they're doing. But yeah, it takes a lot of energy.
So what do you remember, Mike, when you woke up?
Yeah, I remember stopping my watch. I remember everything after I woke up. So I remember, texting my wife and she not believing me and thought I was playing a joke on her. And then I called her and she started yelling at me, and Dr. Ellison took the phone from me and let her know what happened. And then remember, going to the hospital and the ambulance, getting on the gurney, and I saw my wife coming and she met me at the hospital. I remember everything that happened after that point.
Wow. And did anybody see a light or anything like that? Did you have any dying experiences?
No. I just thought I'd passed out for me.
Not a one.
And what happened after? So you go to the hospital, guys, and then is there surgery or a stent or nothing?
Yeah, I had a stent and a defibrillator implanted because they couldn't get one of the arteries open. Then I went in for a follow-up surgery on February 2nd, where in San Francisco with a couple of surgeons who focus on and concentrate on the most chronic cases. And they were able to entirely clear me up with putting in like 3 more stents. So I'm 100% good now.
Wow, thank you. And the thing that you have was it the same thing your dad had? How many years prior? 40 years prior, your father drops dead at a race, and then you do the same?
Yeah, he went when he was like 2 years younger than me. So yeah, it was in the annual 4th of July race. He had CPR done on him for like 10 minutes by a news helicopter pilot and some other folks that had come across before they could get the defibrillator and the ambulance to him. And then when he came to, it was just in the hospital. So he didn't even, wake up there or in the ambulance, but he woke up in the hospital luckily. And then he had another 22 years after that, which was great. But yeah, I think it's largely, for me, it was hereditary. I didn't have any warning signs, chest pain or anything like that. And I had just gotten checked out in October before the race with my, yearly physical, including a blood test with cholesterol and everything. And they gave me a clean bill of health there.
Interesting. And then you, Greg?
I woke up in the ambulance, and that's when I started to come to, and I had so much chest pain. And the ambulance technician indicated, you may have had a cardiac event. And then he described it. He described what happened. And then they were smiling and laughing the whole time. And they put me at ease. I was so relaxed at that point. They just made me feel so comfortable that it was going to be fine. I believe I may have asked him, am I going to die? And he indicated something like, you already did, you're alive. And from that point forward, it was all smiles to the hospital. Then when the hospital technicians took over, they were fabulous at the hospital. I was so comfortable. They made me so comfortable. That's all I can describe. I felt so at ease. I knew I was going to survive. I knew I had medications coming to me. I knew I was going to get into a room, on and on and on. So it felt good once I got to the hospital. And then when I got to the floor, it was even better. Just amazing what took place there.
And you were at CHOMP, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So Community Hospital of Monterey Peninsula, we want to give them a lot of love. They're a huge sponsor for our Big Sur International Marathon races and a incredible partner. And I get to witness them working at that finish line every year, and they're twice a year, and they're spectacular. So I'm glad they took great care of you. I'm not surprised. No, do you work with CHOMP too, Dr. Lome?
Yeah, I'm actually employed technically kind of by them. In California, hospitals can't really employ a doctor. So they have a Montage Health owns CHOMP and also owns the medical group separately that I work for, Montage Medical Group. So I kind of work for the hospital, you could say. I'm the chief of cardiology at the hospital, medical director in the outpatient setting.
So we can definitely say that. So they get carted off, and then what does the rest of your morning, afternoon look like after you've saved 2 lives and ran a half marathon and was a super dad?
I remember texting my kids because they were texting me like, "Where are you, Dad? What's going on? Why haven't you finished yet? Are you okay? Did you?" So they were worried about me, and I'm like, "No, I'll tell you later. I'll tell you later. You won't believe what happened." And I remember explaining everything to them, and they were just like, not quite getting, the gravity of what just happened. It took a while for it to sink in. For me too, actually even took a couple of days or so. I remember when I called the interventional cardiologist the second time about Mike that was on call. He's like, "What? You're joking." He didn't believe me. He thought I was lying. Like, no. You got a second patient that's going to be coming. And then when it really hit me, I decided there's a physician Facebook group where there's about, I forget the number, like 60,000 physicians as a part of this group. And I decided, let me kind of share this story. It's a positive upbeat story. Greg and Mike both made full recoveries. This is great. And the response to that Facebook post was overwhelming. And I got, multiple messages, emails, requests for, to be on shows and things like that. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. Let me post this on what was then called Twitter. And that's when it kind of went viral. And our story, thank goodness, is, such a positive message, hopefully can save other people's lives, was shared on Runner's World, Washington Post, lots of other, USA Today. We were on the Today Show, which was a great experience where Greg and Mike got to meet each other for the first time. And I got to reunite with them both as well. And then we continued our efforts too. Afterwards too, we've done speaking at charity events. And then we just, a year later, can you believe this? How strong are Greg and Mike here? A year later afterwards, they come back and they conquer the course. Just blew it away. It was such a great race about a month or so ago to come back and see them accomplish that after what happened the year before. I'm so proud. I mean, it was amazing.
So watching you 3 line up together and then finish that race together was extraordinary. When did you all commit to doing so?
Right after the, like in the hospital, pretty much. Yeah, it was I knew that we would have to do it again just to enjoy the after party and each other's company if they were going to be doing it. But yeah, I knew right away that I'd have to do it again.
Same here, right away in the hospital. We were 2 doors down from each other, but they wouldn't let us talk to each other. They kind of slipped the hint. The other runner is next couple doors down, but they didn't want to tell me his name. They couldn't tell me anything because of confidentiality, which was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I would have snuck out of that bed and been like, "Hey, are you the one?" Now, what factors reign as the most shocking, interesting? Because there's so many little, like you said, Godwinks. Greg, what really blows your mind about this whole experience? Any one of you?
I'll start with my biggest Godwink. About 2 to 3 weeks before the race, this would have been middle of October, and I'd been running close to 35, 40 miles a week, lifting weights, doing all my exercises. And one Saturday afternoon, something told me, you need to do more chest exercises. You need to make sure you follow through on your bench press.
Wow.
So I increased my bench press up to about, literally, I lift weights. I was lifting dumbbells. I was doing 3 days a week. Probably, I counted them up, close to 60 reps as I go through my exercises a day. And I told myself, I need to continue that. Something told me, you need to do that. You need to do that. I don't know why. Something just told me, you need to build up your chest. Make sure you're strong in the chest. So I kept doing what my mind told me to do. And sure enough, but for the fact that I had all those chest compressions, it might have been worse. And I look at myself in the photograph before I had the heart attack from the 22 race, and I was pretty thick in the chest. And I'm glad I was at that time, because Dr. Lome told me, he came into the hospital that night, and he says, you are going to be sore for a long, long time. And sure enough, I finally got over the stiffness and pain about a month ago.
Wow.
I had 2 fractured ribs and maybe a little laceration to the spleen, they're thinking, but they're following up on that. So I had a lot of chest damage, but I was so fine with it. No worries here. But that 3-week build up to the race, I think that kept me, as you indicated in your web pages, the stronger you are before a crisis happens, the more likely you are to survive it.
Yeah.
And that is absolute truth here. I was pretty strong before, and I was strong on the date of the heart attack. No doubt in my mind.
Yeah, I love that. And so I tell folks, especially with my fun experience with cancer, is prepare your body to do battle today, because some people, they neglect their health. Now we have this perfect example of men who are taking their health so seriously and working so hard. But there's so many people out there like, oh, it doesn't matter. And then when they get sick or they get injured, then they're in a way worse place, because, okay, go get hurt. And if you start out as a weakling when you get hurt, yikes, the road back to any sort of normalcy is just a nightmare. But if you've done your due diligence and you're as fit as humanly possible, whether you get hit by a car, you get have a heart attack, you're far more likely to rebound and recover more quickly and efficiently. So Dr. Lome, with his chest strength, do you think that prevented you from breaking ribs?
Yeah, you would assume, you never know, but I mean, you would think that his injuries would have been much worse had he not been so fit, for sure.
And then on that note, so many of us get CPR certified. Even if you're not certified, folks, it's not really complicated. There's a bunch of little short tutorials on the internet. You can learn CPR virtually anywhere, but people might be afraid, oh no, that person is not breathing, but I might hurt them. So what's your answer to that?
Well, first of all, with the video you got to watch on YouTube is the American Heart Association. It's like a little commercial. It's called Hands Only CPR. And the surgeon comedian Ken Jeong, if you know him, is the lead person in that little commercial. It's only 2 or 3 minutes. And the reason hands-only CPR has become the predominant way to do it is because the most critical part is keeping blood circulating. You have oxygen for at least 5 minutes, probably longer, before you start getting brain injury. And a lot of times during cardiac arrest, patients still have a little bit of breathing on their own. And so you may have longer. And especially in the pandemic era, people are afraid to give mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. That was the historic way. And I don't want to do that. Ew, COVID, all these things, put my mouth down there. So it kind of eliminates that. All you got to do is remember two things. Number one is call 911 right away, because you need a defibrillator there. Without the defibrillator, you could do CPR, you could do chest compressions for hours and hours. Nothing's going to happen. You need the defibrillator. So call 911. That's number one. And number two, push hard and fast in the center of the chest to the beat of the song Staying Alive, because that's the proper beat. So I heard they were going to use the song Another One Bites the Dust, because that's got the right too, but that's kind of the wrong song, if you know what I mean. So Staying Alive. So hands-only CPR. Check out, it's a really funny commercial video that gets the point across. American Heart Association's hands-only CPR.
That's great. I will add those links to the content of this website. So what about you, Dr. Lome? What is your Godwink for your connection with these guys?
Well, my whole career, my story of having lost 100 pounds, making a lot of mistakes, recapturing my health, became board certified in lifestyle medicine, and I preach nutrition now. Guidelines to the American Heart Association for prevention of heart disease recommend a plant-based diet or a Mediterranean diet in a pro-vegetarian pattern, along with exercise, don't smoke, maintain ideal body weight, all those things. But diet is king, is what they always say. And I think, a lot of things that personally happened to me for me to become a preventative lifestyle medicine cardiologist with my family and losing weight and all these things. And the experience, my mom used to smoke her whole life, and I saw her struggles trying to quit smoking. But I think this, I don't know if I would call it a Godwink, but certainly one of the things that come from this that kind of just add to my personal experience as a lifestyle medicine cardiologist is just how important it is to not only learn CPR, get your heart checked if you have risk factors or whatever, and eating the absolute cleanest diet, because research shows that about 95% of heart disease is preventable. Some people think higher. If you start in childhood eating as clean as possible, the blue zones, longest living cultures in the world ever, heart disease pretty much doesn't exist in their cultures. They're about 95% plant-based. They're physically active, low stress. They don't smoke. They're very thin and have a lot of social engagement. And trying to focus on that, because it really blew my mind away when I learned that heart disease, which is the number one cause of death. Let me throw some stats at you here. Heart disease, number one killer in America every year since 1919. 1918, it was Spanish flu. Kills more Americans every year than the number of American soldiers that died in combat in all wars in American history combined ever. The first symptom of heart disease in about 1 out of 4 patients is cardiac arrest, like what happened in Mike. The first major symptom is cardiac arrest. So prevention is critical. And in regards to prevention, the plaque that builds up in the arteries, the cholesterol plaque, literally starts before you were born in some cases, or at least the day you're born. There are studies that have shown that pregnant women with high cholesterol, their unborn fetus already has the start of what's called a fatty streak, cholesterol building up in their arteries. And so the foundation begins in childhood, and the sooner in life somebody eats healthy, stays active, make sure cholesterol numbers are down, and avoid things like secondhand smoke and tobacco, the better you're going to be decades and decades and decades and decades later. So the two keys to prevention is controlling blood cholesterol numbers, number one, and then number two is protecting the arteries from damage and inflammation, which is mostly diet related.
Powerful.
Crazy.
Yeah. Well, and what I love about all that is you said 95% of us can control this. 95% of all heart disease is controllable. We're not arbitrary victims. We might be victims of our own stupidity or bad habits, but we can control our outcome and prevent heart attacks. That's pretty awesome. That's really exciting information, don't you think?
Yeah, it blows my mind away, actually, when you think about it, because, if we could prevent 95% of heart disease, a way you could think about it is that we essentially have a cure for America's number one killer, at least 95% of it, right? But we have actively chosen as a culture, as a food system, as a healthcare system, to kind of ignore that cure because, it's hard to change diet. And there's a multi-billion-dollar food industry and a multi-trillion-dollar healthcare industry that profits off of, when people get sick and need procedures and medications and such. So it's a challenge to overcome that. But, our healthcare system needs to lead the way to a preventative mindset, but it really doesn't make money for healthcare systems, which is the biggest barrier. But it's changing, and they are changing it in a positive way, and we are gonna move it in the right direction, no question.
So, hold on, let me bring Greg back in. So, on that note, where so many cardiologists, I mean, again, I know you work with them, and I've spoken for them, where I see so many physicians who, I mean, once you know what a comorbidity is, one would think, okay, you would say, I don't want that. I don't want to end up far more likely to die because of these things. I'm going to behave. I hate to use that word, but, control my eating habits and exercise and do all the things I can. Yet instead, there's so many people that are like you had thought previously is, I'll just put a Band-Aid on it. I know how to fix this. So instead of preventing it, and I am not a pessimist. I'm not a cynic. I don't believe that all the people in the healthcare want to keep you sick and keep you coming so they'll keep hiring you, right? What do you think the solution is there?
It's got to be a culture shift and a shift in how hospitals and doctors get paid for taking care of patients. We need to get paid to keep our patients healthy and keep them out of the hospital, not paid more when they get sick and we have to do a surgery on them in the hospital. So prevention really needs to be the focus. It's unfortunate. The number one cause of death amongst physicians is heart disease. The number one cause of death amongst cardiologists is heart disease, despite it being 95% preventable. And I know preventative medicine cardiologists that sit at a dinner party and eat steak and have plenty of dessert. And you're like, that's kind of the cause of the whole thing that you're trying to prevent there. But it's hard because we grew up that way and people like the taste of unhealthy food, processed foods and higher fat, animal-based foods, fried foods and such. People love the taste of that, and it's the way we grew up. And so food is the biggest pleasure for many people, and they just don't want to give it up. But I love a couple of quotes from Kim Williams. His name. He's a doctor. He's past president of the American College of Cardiology. So arguably the top cardiologist in the country, maybe the world, I don't know, for a time period. His quote is that there are two types of cardiologists: vegans and those who have not yet read the research. And then his other quote was, eating a whole food, plant-based, low-fat diet and lifestyle changes is a cure for heart disease. If you're a cardiologist and you don't emphasize that cure for your patients, that's medical malpractice, because you're withholding a cure from your patient, and you can't do that. You can't withhold a cure. And that's coming from arguably the most powerful cardiologist in the country or the world at the time. And but that message doesn't get through because, again, people like the taste of the unhealthy food. Our culture, our food system, it's challenging socially to eat as super clean, and people can conquer the exercise. But the diet's the hardest part. And Greg and Mike have been doing awesome plant-based diets. I love it.
Now, have you guys changed your eating habits? I mean, obviously you were exercising fabulously before you died. So what has changed about your eating habits, Mike?
Yeah, we definitely have gone to a whole plant-based diet immediately after the heart attacks. And even my son has gone over. He's just in college, and he immediately went over to become vegan and go on to a whole plant-based diet. And it's made a big difference.
Fantastic. So potentially your cardiac arrest could have saved your son's life, because he's now changed his behavior in a way where maybe he won't be the third in the row to drop on a race.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And we were eating what we thought was pretty healthy before. We would have, we would avoid red meats. We would have like chicken and fish once in a while. But we've gone even more to the whole plant-based side of things now, and are continuing to evolve that way.
It's Wonderful. Wonderful. Greg, what about you?
Same here, plant-based. I've given up cheese, dairy, beef, chicken, pork, a little bit of salmon on occasion, but not much. I'm trying to follow the regimen and stick to it. I'll cheat a little bit on maybe a sweet or two, but that's about it. I'm not falling too far away. I'm trying to stay.
And life is still worth living.
Absolutely. I want those 22 years that Michael's dad had. That's all I need, and I'll be happy.
Yeah, you know, I'm a vegetarian, and so I don't try to. Well, I would love for more people to hop on board. I agree with you, Dr. Lome, that it's the answer to a lot of problems. It's a solution, but some people just think it's so extreme. And so if you're listening and you think, oh, I really would like that perk, but I love my hamburger. Okay, well, just make it rare. You don't have to tell everybody I'm a vegan right away. What you can just do is start eating more and more plant-based meals and snacks, and less of the other. And you might find you feel so good that you start diminishing the bad stuff and increasing the good stuff more and more. What do you think about that, Dr. Lome?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. You know, everybody's different at a different point and has a different ability to do something like change their diet. Some people can go all in real hard right away, especially when an event, like a heart attack or cardiac arrest happens. Other people, the change needs to be gradual. But for many people, just start eating more healthy, whole food, plant-based meals. And if you just start eating more and building your repertoire, your regimen, your recipes, and you'll love it. You'll enjoy it more and more. And by default, by eating more plant-based, you'll be eating less of the unhealthy foods. And I think there's a really interesting story. There's a guy named Penn Jillette. Have you heard of him? The Penn and Teller Show, magician comedian. He wrote a book called Presto, How I Made 100 Pounds Disappear. You know, he's a really big guy. I forget how tall he is, 6'8", and he weighed 300 something pounds, but he had some health issues. He went 100% plant-based, lost a bunch of weight. And he talks about how he wrote in his book. It's very vulgar. He, talks a lot about his private parts and such, but in the book, it was a very good book. And he talks about how he's doing this all for his health. And as he ate more plant-based, he really started craving more plant-based foods. And started not craving animal-based foods. And he kind of thought, as he did more, talk to doctors and such, that a lot of it has to do with our microbiome, the bacteria in our gut. It controls our mood. It controls our cravings. And so as you eat more plant-based foods, you change the bacteria in your gut to those that want to digest more plant-based foods, more high-fiber foods. And so it tells you keep eating these things. And it can tell you stop eating the animal-based foods because that'll compete with me. And the bacteria won't be able to survive in your gut, the plant-based bacteria, if you're eating more animal-based foods, because that'll select for the animal-based bacteria. And Penn Jillette is funny in his book. He's like, I'm doing this just for my health. And then he goes on the Joe Rogan podcast, and Joe Rogan says, hey, I read your book. Great job, man. You went plant-based, lost all this weight for your health. He's like, I'm not doing it for my health anymore. He's like, I'm doing it for the animals because I don't want to kill a sentient being. And it was like, oh my gosh, where'd that come from? And Penn Jillette thinks that the bacteria in his gut made him a more compassionate person, did not want to cause harm to others. Very interesting take. So, hey, it is what it is. But whatever works to get people to change their diet. In my world, I just want my patient healthy. So whatever works, whether it's the animal rights, the environmental, or if it's purely for health, I just want my patient healthy and eat less processed foods or eliminate processed foods, dramatically less animal foods, and eat more whole food plant-based.
So number one killer, heart disease. What's the number two killer of Americans?
Cancer.
That's right. And so my Your Healthy Cancer Comeback book, one of my favorite chapters is, where is it? It's number 8. It is foods that help versus foods that hurt. And people don't know that processed meats are labeled by the World Health Organization as a
class 1 carcinogen.
Class 1 carcinogen.
Same category as alcohol, plutonium, and tobacco. Yeah.
I mean, and there's quite a few in that category of red meats and pork, and there's nothing of risk when you go into fruits and veggies and legumes and beans and nuts and grains. None of those things will cause cancer. In fact, those are things that are the helpers that help prevent cancer. And, it is the endless amount of studies and research prove that you can weaponize exercise and nutrition to prevent a lot of cancers, but most importantly to those who have been diagnosed is get yourself closer to remission and prevent a recurrence. Now, I don't think it's more the exclusive path to Western medicine, but if you can control certain things, well, shouldn't you? And if you're a plant-based person doing it right, not having Doritos for every meal, Doritos and, French bread every meal, if you're actually pursuing high nutrition, the opportunity to fend off cancer and heart disease with one effort, that's pretty powerful stuff.
Absolutely. I think, just like heart disease, cancer might not be as preventable as heart disease is, but it's still, especially certain types of cancer, can be at least 50% preventable. And you definitely want to prevent the cancer rather than, have to deal with it afterwards. So yeah, no question about it.
Okay. And then here's another thing I get. A lot of people say, well, they point to me, I'm a fitness expert who had cancer. They go, well, you had cancer, so why try? Why try? So why try? They had heart disease. They ran and they still had heart attacks. So why try, guys?
Oh, it could happen again. And the same process that causes heart disease can cause stroke if it happens in the brain.
Yeah. And why take the chance? It's easy enough to it was easy enough for me to change my diet and, get better. So it gives you an edge, right? Wouldn't you want an edge in anything that you do if you could get one? And this is an easy way to sort of go about that, I think.
Absolutely. So guys, when you got together just about a month or so ago in the Monterey Bay Half Marathon 2023, you lined up together. What did that feel like? What was the race experience and your finish line?
That was amazing. It was such a great moment. Greg and Mike powered right through that race. It was emotional, but obviously something I'll never forget.
Did you guys have laughs out on the course? Was it fun?
Lots of laughs, a lot of work, but lots of laughs. Going through mile 3 was the biggest hurdle for me. And then finishing I was overcome with joy and happiness, probably 2 miles from the end. I was talking to Dr. Lome the whole time. I felt so great those last 2 miles, just emotionally to get through it.
Yeah, we were all doing really well. I was happy that they slowed down for me because I'm much slower than both of them are. But it was great to run the whole race with them and finish together as a team and brothers.
For life, right?
Absolutely, for life.
Yeah, what a pleasure it was for all of us who were in the know and watching you guys. I was, it's one of those speechless moments. You take the noisy woman and make her speechless. It was just a joy to watch you all come through together. And I hope you'll do it again. Are you committed to coming back every year?
I'm definitely going to do it for a while longer, but
coming back next year.
Yeah. All right.
And
I'm not sure we might be back, but I think we might do before that the LA Marathon.
Yeah, I'm signed up too
in March.
Okay. What a shame. I've announced that forever. I won't be there this year. And then any consideration of the Big Sur International Marathon?
I'd love to. Yeah. I know it's a difficult one, very hilly, and it's been kind of windy, but I'm signing up this April. I've never done it before, so I can't wait.
Oh, so you'll be there this year?
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, when last year I wasn't able to go. My kids had a field trip. My wife was chaperoning. I had my daughter had a field trip, so I had to watch the other 5 kids. But this year the field trip lined up perfectly, so I'm gonna be able to go.
Outstanding. Well, obviously we will look forward to giving you a king's welcome through your finish line, of course.
Thank you.
Of course. Is there anything you guys would like to add? We'll start with you, Greg.
I want to know how you're doing. I've read your history. So how are you doing mentally, physically, emotionally, and otherwise? You have so much energy. I
am the happiest girl on earth. I'm pre-cancer, during cancer, post-cancer. I'm just grateful for every day. And I'm obsessed with you and all the other people I get to associate in this wonderful running and fitness world. I'm dinged up, but I'm also 100%. I'm a better version of me now. So thank you for asking.
Same thing. I'm dinged up, but I feel so grateful for every single morning that I'm on this earth. That's the best part.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I think I had 3 cars with issues today. It was, and who cares? Who cares? It's not cancer. So like, whatever. It makes every day better. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, it's just put everything in perspective, and I'm super grateful to be here for every day and all the extra time that I'm going to be able to have with my family and have had so far, and make the most of it.
Absolutely.
And then, for people out there, I'd say, if you have a family history, make sure you go get checked out. You can get the heart calcium test, and that's a good one that everybody should try and get if they're worried about their heart.
Dr. Lome?
Yeah, I would say, learn CPR and get your heart checked if you have risk factors, eat a plant-based diet, focus on prevention. You never know when something's crazy going to happen. I just want to say again, though, just how amazing Greg and Mike both are. I mean, they're just such amazing people, such strong people, and you as well, Fitz, and I guess the expression, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, is definitely true in all 3 of your cases, because you guys came out of what you've been through much stronger, wonderful people. What I love about it all too, just the cherry on top is using an experience like this and a story like this to help other people and spread the message, literally probably saving other people's lives. And that's so important. So thank you for what you do, spreading all this positivity, and who knows how many lives you've saved just by spreading this message.
Wow, it's you guys have a good one to share. So you have 2 websites, Dr. Lome. You have heartstrong.com.
Yeah, I've done a lot of crazy things in my life. I had learntheheart.com, and that was acquired, and then heartstrong.com, and I do YouTube as well. Just my name, Stephen Lome, on YouTube. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Folks need to go follow you. Yeah, I mean, it's great information, and I love that it's science. You've got evidence to back up all of your suggestions, and people could use that, right?
Yeah, that's what I love about lifestyle medicine. Unlike some other things like functional medicine, homeopathic medicine, they're not as evidence-based. Like, you don't have the randomized controlled clinical trials. They're not necessarily advocated by the big authorities, American Heart Association and such. Lifestyle medicine is all evidence-based. We take the guidelines that the American Heart Association, the World Health Organization, put together, and we apply that as the primary treatment for somebody's issue, and then medications are second. Unlike the Western world, they just throw medicines at you and say, good luck with the lifestyle stuff. And that's what I love about it all. It is all very much so evidence-based, in alignment with the guidelines from the major medical societies.
Yeah, I think that goes a long way. There's so many people pumping or pushing weird, ineffective, expensive things that do far more harm than help. So I appreciate the good guys preaching the good stuff. All right, gentlemen, it has been my pleasure. I started this by saying I fall in love with everyone who comes to my start line. You guys have it like a billion times. I love you, and I love you, and I would do anything to see you back at a start and finish line again. So please come back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Everyone. And folks, if you haven't done so already, click like and share and follow the Fitzness Show. Reach out to me on social media and let me know what you think of this episode. And everybody, tell my listeners to get to work. Say, get to work.
Get to work.
Hey, you go get to work.
Bye.